The rain had been falling steadily all afternoon, turning the small-town streets into shiny ribbons that reflected the gray sky above. Most people had already sought shelter in their homes, leaving the streets quieter than usual. In the heart of the town, there was a small cafe that looked ordinary at first glance. Its windows were slightly foggy, and the warm light from inside spilled out onto the wet pavement. Inside, a few regulars sipped coffee and worked quietly on their laptops, the soft murmur of conversation blending with the gentle clinking of cups and plates. The bell above the door jingled, and a man walked in, shaking the rain off his coat. He was middle-aged, neatly dressed, with an air of authority that made people glance up for a moment before returning to their own activities. He did not rush to a table, nor did he seem interested in the menu. Instead, he stood at the counter, scanning the room with a thoughtful expression. The waitress, a young woman with a calm demeanor and a natural warmth, noticed him immediately. She had worked there for several years and knew most of the regulars by name, but this man was clearly not a local. There was something about the way he carried himself that made him seem different from the usual visitors. He was not hurried or impatient. He was deliberate, as if he were looking for something very specific. He approached the counter and asked in a clear, steady voice, "Can you tell me who has the best mind in this room?" The words hung in the air for a moment, catching everyone by surprise. A few heads turned, some in curiosity, others in mild amusement. The regulars exchanged puzzled glances, unsure how to respond. The question was unusual, almost as if it belonged in a different time or place. Most people would have brushed it off or laughed politely, but this was different. The man was serious, and there was no hint of jest in his tone. The waitress studied him for a moment, sensing both the weight of his question and the expectation behind it. She could have ignored it, as others seemed to do, but something inside her urged her to speak. She straightened her posture and replied calmly, "I can answer that." There was a brief pause. The man's eyes lit up with interest, and he gestured for her to follow him to a small table by the window. The rain outside continued its steady rhythm, a soft backdrop to the unusual encounter that was about to unfold. They sat down, and he introduced himself simply, without any formalities. As someone who sought ideas and perspectives that were different from the ordinary, he explained that he often looked for insight in unexpected places because he had learned that intelligence and creativity were not always tied to titles or positions. Some of the most brilliant solutions, he said, came from people who were observant, curious, and willing to see the world in a way others did not. The waitress listened attentively, her hands resting lightly on the table. She had always enjoyed thinking deeply about things, even when life's demands left little room for reflection. Her job was demanding, and she often worked long hours. But she found moments to observe the people around her, to notice patterns and connections that others overlooked. It was this quiet curiosity that had guided her decisions, small and large, throughout her life. The man leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. "I want to hear your thoughts," he said. "I want to understand how you see the world, how you solve problems, and how you make sense of things that seem complicated." She felt a mix of surprise and nervousness. Few people had ever asked her such questions, and fewer still had listened with genuine interest. She took a moment to collect her thoughts and then began to speak. She talked about the simple things. First, the rhythm of daily life, the way people interacted, the small decisions that often went unnoticed but had a profound impact on outcomes. She described how she observed patterns in behavior, how she could anticipate needs before they were expressed, and how she approached challenges not by rushing to solutions but by understanding the situation fully. The man listened without interruption, nodding occasionally, clearly impressed by the clarity and depth of her perspective. He asked questions, not to test her, but to explore the nuances of her thinking. She responded with honesty, sometimes pausing to consider her words carefully, knowing that what she said mattered more than how quickly she said it. As they talked, other patrons of the cafe began to notice the intensity of the conversation. Some were curious, others skeptical, but all were drawn to the energy in the room. There was no arrogance in the waitress's manner. No pretense, just a genuine, thoughtful engagement that seemed to capture the attention of everyone nearby. It was clear that this was not a performance. This was the expression of a mind that was awake and aware. The man shared some of his own experiences. The challenges he faced in his work, the moments when he struggled to find the right path. He explained how often he encountered situations that required more than technical knowledge or formal education, situations that demanded insight, empathy, and the ability to connect ideas in ways that others might not see. The waitress responded with her observations, offering perspectives that were practical, intuitive, and surprisingly innovative. She did not offer grand theories or complicated jargon. She spoke in simple, direct terms, yet her ideas resonated deeply. Hours seemed to pass unnoticed. The rain continued outside, the cafe's lights casting a warm glow on the wet streets. The conversation flowed naturally, moving from abstract ideas to concrete examples, from personal stories to broader reflections on life and human nature. The man found himself captivated by her ability to articulate thoughts that were both insightful and relatable. He realized that intelligence could indeed take many forms, and sometimes the most profound understanding came from those who had not been trained to impress or to conform. As the afternoon turned to evening, the man finally leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful smile on his face. "I did not expect to find what I was looking for in a small cafe on a rainy day," he admitted. "But I see now that the best minds are not always in the places we expect. They are wherever curiosity, observation, and reflection meet courage." The waitress smiled, a quiet acknowledgment of the truth in his words. She had spent much of her life unnoticed, her talents and insights hidden beneath the routine of daily work. Yet here was someone who recognized them, who valued the way she thought and the perspective she could offer. It was a moment of validation, not for the sake of praise, but for the recognition that everyone's mind held the potential for brilliance if given the chance. As they parted ways that evening, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. The man left the cafe with a sense of anticipation, eager to explore the ideas that had emerged from the conversation. The waitress returned to her duties, but something within her had shifted. She carried with her a quiet confidence, a deeper awareness of her own abilities, and the realization that sometimes the right question asked at the right time could change the course of a life. The cafe returned to its usual rhythm, the few remaining patrons finishing their drinks and preparing to leave. Yet the encounter lingered in the air, an invisible mark on the space, a reminder that brilliance could appear in the most unexpected places. And for the waitress, it was the beginning of a journey, a moment when the ordinary became extraordinary, when a simple question opened the door to possibilities she had never imagined. That rainy afternoon would be remembered, not for the weather, nor for the quiet hum of the cafe, but for the meeting of two minds, one seeking, one ready to answer on the beginning of a story that neither of them could have predicted. It was proof that sometimes the most important connections happen in the simplest of places, and that the true measure of a mind is not where it resides, but how it engages with the world around it. The man and the waitress sat at the small table near the window, the steady drizzle outside creating a soft background rhythm that seemed to encourage conversation. He had already been impressed by her confidence and composure, but now he wanted to understand the way she thought. He leaned forward, resting his hands lightly on the table, and asked her to explain how she approached problems and decisions in everyday life. She paused, thinking for a moment. "I try to notice things that others might miss," she said. "Small details can tell you a lot about people and situations. If you pay attention, you can understand why something happens or predict what might happen next. I don't rely on formulas or textbooks. I rely on observation, listening, and asking questions." The man nodded, intrigued. "And has that always worked for you?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Not always," she admitted. "Sometimes you make mistakes. Sometimes you misread a situation. But even mistakes teach you something. The key is to learn from them and stay curious. Curiosity is more important than knowing all the answers." He leaned back slightly, clearly impressed. He had spent years in business, dealing with people who often claimed knowledge they didn't have or relied on rigid rules. Here was someone who understood that life and problems were rarely black and white, and that insight often came from careful attention rather than authority. She continued, Explaining how she noticed patterns in people's behavior. People reveal more than they realize, she said. A glance, a gesture, the way someone pauses before they speak, all of these things matter. They tell you what they value, what they fear, and sometimes what they want but can't say out loud. Paying attention to these small signals helps you understand the bigger picture. The man smiled. He realized that she was describing a skill he had learned to value over many years, the ability to see what others overlooked. But she had a natural talent for it, a way of interpreting information that was intuitive yet grounded in reality. He felt that she could offer insights that were both practical and profound. Curious? He asked her about her daily life and how she applied these observations outside of work. She spoke about her experiences in the cafe, observing how customers interacted, how colleagues approached tasks, and even how the town itself had its own rhythms and patterns. She had learned to anticipate needs, to offer help before being asked, and to solve small problems before they became larger ones. Her explanations were simple, but they carried weight. She was describing a way of thinking that was both disciplined and flexible, a combination rarely seen in any professional setting. The man felt a growing admiration, not just for her intellect, but for the quiet confidence with which she expressed her ideas. He decided to test her a little, not with trick questions, but with scenarios from his own work. He asked how she might handle a situation where a team was failing to meet deadlines due to miscommunication and lack of motivation. She listened carefully, her eyes reflecting focus and thoughtfulness. First, I would try to understand why it's happening, she said. Are people confused about their roles? Are they feeling undervalued? Are there external pressures we can't see? Once you understand the root cause, you can address it directly. Sometimes it's as simple as clarifying expectations. Sometimes it requires motivating people by showing them why their work matters. And sometimes it means changing the way the team communicates. But the first step is always observation and understanding. The man leaned back, clearly impressed. He had expected a standard management answer, perhaps something from a textbook. Instead, he received a response rooted in empathy and practical wisdom, showing that she understood not just systems but human nature. Encouraged, he asked another question, this time about creativity. He wanted to know how she generated ideas when faced with a challenge she had never encountered before. She considered this for a moment, then replied, I try to break the problem into smaller parts. I look at each part and ask what's really important. I try to see it from different angles, sometimes imagining how someone else might approach it. I don't wait for inspiration to strike. I work through it, step by step, until a solution emerges. Her approach was methodical yet flexible, a combination that impressed him. He could see why she might be considered one of the sharpest minds in a room. Even if she wore an apron and carried trays of coffee for a living, their conversation flowed naturally. Moving from work and problem-solving to life and philosophy, she spoke about the importance of balance, of noticing beauty in ordinary moments, and of being present in the work she did. He found himself drawn to her perspective. Realizing that her insights applied not just to business but to life itself, she spoke of the people she had met and observed over the years, describing how each person had a story, a motivation, and a perspective that shaped their actions. We all operate based on what we know and what we believe, she said. The better we understand that, the better we can connect, collaborate, and create something meaningful. He nodded slowly. He had spent his life analyzing data, strategies, and metrics. But here was a reminder that human insight often carried more weight than numbers alone. She was demonstrating an intelligence that was holistic, encompassing both logic and empathy, observation and imagination. The cafe, once a quiet backdrop, now seemed alive with the energy of their dialogue. The other patrons had grown silent, some listening quietly, drawn to the depth of the conversation. It was clear that this was not just idle chatter. It was a meeting of minds, a rare exchange that went beyond social convention and superficial talk. He asked her about challenges she had faced in her own life, curious how she had developed such a keen sense of perception and understanding. She spoke of small hardships, moments of doubt, and the lessons she had learned from observing the world around her. Each story she told was imbued with reflection, showing how she had turned everyday experiences into insights that could guide decisions and actions. The man was struck by how her mind worked. She had a way of simplifying complexity without losing depth. She noticed details that others overlooked, connected ideas that seemed unrelated, and considered the human element in every situation. It was rare to find someone who could combine observation, empathy, and analysis so seamlessly. He asked her what she wanted for the future. Expecting a modest response about staying in her current job or pursuing small personal goals, instead, she spoke about curiosity, learning, and making a meaningful impact in whatever she did. Her ambitions were not loud or grandiose, but they were grounded in thoughtfulness and a desire to contribute. As the conversation continued, the man realized that he had found not just a brilliant mind, but a kindred spirit in terms of curiosity and the pursuit of understanding. He saw potential, not only for immediate insights, but for a long-term partnership where ideas could be explored and developed together. They talked until the sky darkened, the cafe lights glowing warmly against the encroaching evening. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, but inside, the atmosphere was charged with thought and reflection. Each had learned something from the other, the exchange of ideas creating a bridge between their worlds. Finally, the man leaned back, satisfied. "I asked for the best mind in the room," he said quietly, "and I see that I have found it. Your observations, your approach, and your understanding are remarkable. I have rarely encountered someone who sees the world so clearly and can articulate it so well." The waitress smiled, feeling a quiet sense of validation. She had always known the value of careful observation and thoughtful reflection. It was rare for someone to recognize it in such a meaningful way. She had never imagined that a simple day at work could lead to a conversation that would leave such a lasting impression on both of them as they parted that evening. The rain finally ceased, leaving the streets glistening under the streetlights. The man left the cafe with new ideas and a renewed sense of curiosity, eager to explore the perspectives she had shared. The waitress returned to her work, carrying with her a deeper confidence and a realization that her mind, her insight, and her way of seeing the world were valuable beyond measure. The encounter lingered in the air, an invisible thread connecting to minds who had met by chance but had found in each other a rare and meaningful exchange. It was a reminder that brilliance often emerges where it is least expected, and that sometimes a simple question and an open mind can uncover its potential that had gone unnoticed for years. The cafe returned to its quiet rhythm, but for the waitress and the man, the day had left an indelible mark. It was the beginning of a story, a journey of ideas and understanding that would continue to unfold in ways neither could have imagined at the start. Their conversation had opened a door to possibility, showing that insight, creativity, and wisdom could reside in the most ordinary places, waiting to be discovered by those willing to look and listen. The next morning, the man returned to the cafe, carrying a small notebook and a quiet intensity in his eyes. The waitress recognized him immediately and welcomed him with a warm smile, curious about what he had planned for today. He asked her if she would be willing to take on a real challenge, something he had been struggling with in his work. Her curiosity was piqued, and she agreed. Eager to apply her thinking in a new and unexpected way, he began by explaining the situation at his company. There was a project that had stalled, with multiple departments working at cross purposes, communication failing, and deadlines constantly being missed. The project was important, and he had tried conventional strategies to resolve it, but nothing had worked. He wanted her perspective, knowing that she might see solutions where others had only found frustration. She listened carefully, absorbing every detail. She asked questions, not to complicate matters, but to understand the context more fully. Her questions were precise and thoughtful. Why were the teams struggling to communicate? What pressures were they under? What were the expectations from management? Her curiosity revealed a depth of understanding that made him realize how important it was to get her perspective. Once she had gathered enough information, she began to share her ideas. She spoke about breaking the project into smaller, manageable parts and focusing on the root causes of the delays rather than just the symptoms. She emphasized the human element, highlighting that misunderstandings often stemmed from unclear roles, unspoken expectations, and a lack of empathy between team members. Her approach was simple, practical, rooted in observation rather than complex theories. The man listened intently, nodding as she spoke. He had expected conventional advice, perhaps a checklist or a series of management steps. But what she offered was a fresh perspective that considered the people behind the project. She suggested small, actionable changes, clarifying responsibilities, establishing clear communication channels, and fostering a culture where team members felt heard and understood. He was impressed by how she had distilled a complex problem into understandable and actionable insights. Her ideas were not flashy or dramatic, but they were effective and thoughtful. He realized that intelligence was not about knowing the most facts, but about seeing the connections that others missed and understanding the human dynamics at play. As they discussed further, she offered another insight: the importance of involving everyone in finding solutions. She suggested creating a space where team members could voice their concerns and contribute ideas, which would not only improve the project but also increase motivation and ownership. Her perspective highlighted the importance of collaboration and mutual respect, showing that even small gestures could lead to significant changes. The man could see the potential in her suggestions. He realized that her approach combined observation, empathy, and practical reasoning in a way that few people could match. He began to imagine how implementing her ideas could transform not just the stalled project but the entire work culture. Within his company, he asked her how she would handle resistance from those who were skeptical or unwilling to change. She smiled and explained that resistance often came from fear or misunderstanding. By listening carefully, acknowledging concerns, and demonstrating the benefits of new approaches, it was possible to gain trust and gradually bring people on board. She emphasized patience, persistence, and communication as keys to overcoming obstacles. As the conversation continued, the man decided to present a hypothetical scenario that pushed the limits of her problem-solving skills. He asked how she would address a situation where two departments had conflicting goals, and both felt that compromise would undermine their objectives. The waitress considered this carefully, reflecting on the human factors, the priorities, and the underlying issues. She proposed a solution that involved negotiation, transparency, and aligning shared goals while respecting each department's needs. Her solution was balanced and thoughtful, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of people and systems. The man leaned back, impressed. He realized that he had underestimated her, not in terms of intelligence, but in terms of her ability to navigate complex challenges with clarity and empathy. He began to see her as more than a waitress. She was a thinker, a problem solver, and someone who could offer perspectives that were rare in his professional world. He asked her if she had ever worked in a corporate setting or handled large-scale projects before. She shook her head, explaining that her experiences had been different but equally valuable. She had observed patterns, learned from interactions, and developed a way of thinking that allowed her to approach problems creatively. Her insights came from life experience, careful observation, and a natural curiosity rather than formal training. The man reflected on this, realizing that brilliance could emerge from unexpected places. He had often sought solutions from experts and professionals, assuming that formal knowledge was the key to success. Now he saw that wisdom could come from anyone who observed carefully, thought deeply, and understood human behavior. They continued to explore the challenge, breaking it down into steps, considering potential obstacles, and discussing strategies for implementation. The waitress's ideas were practical and grounded, but they also showed innovation, demonstrating a rare combination of analytical thinking and creativity. Her approach was neither rigid nor theoretical. It was adaptive, human-centered, and deeply insightful. As the morning passed, the man found himself excited by the possibilities her solutions opened up. He could envision applying her recommendations immediately. It's not just for the project at hand, but for other challenges he faced. Her ability to see connections, anticipate reactions, and propose actionable steps impressed him beyond measure. He realized that her insights had value far beyond what he had initially imagined. They were not just applicable to business, but to life itself. She had demonstrated a way of thinking that combined empathy, practicality, and innovation, a combination that was rare and powerful. Finally, he leaned forward, resting his hands on the table, and spoke with quiet admiration. "I asked you to help me with a challenge, and you have done more than that. You have shown me a perspective I had not considered, a way of approaching problems that is thoughtful, human, and effective. I am grateful for your insight and for the clarity you have brought to this situation." The waitress smiled, feeling a quiet satisfaction. She had not sought recognition, but she appreciated the acknowledgement of her thinking. The exercise had been challenging, but it had also affirmed her belief that careful observation, empathy, and thoughtful action could make a real difference. The man suggested that she'd consider working with him on a project in a more formal capacity. He explained that her skills were rare and that he valued her approach more than he could express. She listened, considering the possibility. It was a new opportunity, one that she had never imagined for herself, and it opened a door to experiences and challenges beyond the cafe as they parted that afternoon. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets gleaming in the late sun. The man left with renewed hope and a sense of direction, while the waitress returned to her work, carrying with her the knowledge that her perspective and thinking had real impact. The encounter had changed something fundamental in both of them. For him, a new appreciation for unexpected brilliance, and for her, a recognition of her own value and potential. The cafe, once just a quiet place in a small town, had become the setting for a turning point. The challenge had been met not with conventional answers, but with insight, empathy, and a practical approach that revealed hidden talent. It was a story of discovery, not just of solutions to problems, but of the untapped abilities within ordinary people waiting to be recognized and nurtured. The day ended with a sense of possibility in the air. The man thought about the ways he could implement her ideas, and the waitress thought about the new opportunities that might lie ahead. Both had experienced a moment of clarity, a meeting of minds that promised transformation and growth. It was proof that intelligence is not measured by titles or positions, but by observation, understanding, and the courage to act thoughtfully and creatively. The challenge had been faced, and in doing so, a connection had been forged that would shape both of their journeys in ways they had yet to fully realize. The next morning, the man returned to the cafe, a sense of purpose in his step and a quiet excitement in his eyes. The waitress noticed him immediately and greeted him with her usual calm smile. Today was different. There was an air of anticipation, as if something important was about to happen. He asked her if she had time to sit and talk again, and she agreed, curious about what he had in mind. They sat at the same table near the window, the soft morning light filtering through the glass. He began by expressing his admiration for the way she had approached the challenge yesterday. Her insights had not only impressed him, but had opened his mind to new possibilities he had not considered before. He explained that he had been thinking about the potential of working together more closely, and he wanted to offer her an opportunity she might never have expected. The waitress listened carefully, a mixture of surprise and cautious excitement in her eyes. She had never imagined that a simple conversation at a cafe could lead to something so significant. He spoke about a project he was about to launch, one that required creative thinking, practical problem solving, and an understanding of people, the very qualities she had demonstrated. He wanted her to join him, to contribute her perspective and ideas in a way that could make a real difference. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if she was ready for such a step. Her life had been predictable, focused on her work in the cafe, the small routines that gave her comfort and stability. The idea of stepping into a new world, one filled with challenges she had never faced, was both thrilling and intimidating. She took a deep breath, considering the possibilities and the risks, and then nodded slowly. Agreeing to explore the opportunity, the man smiled, recognizing her courage and willingness to take a step into the unknown. He explained that the project would require collaboration, creativity, and careful observation. It would challenge her, but it would also provide a chance to grow, to learn, and to contribute in ways she had not imagined. Her role would be valued, and her ideas would have real impact as they discussed the details. She realized that this was not just an opportunity for work, but a chance to explore her own potential. She reflected on the skills she had developed over the years' observation, empathy, careful thinking, and how they could now be applied in a broader context. It was a moment of self-discovery, realization that her talents were meaningful and valuable. Beyond the cafe, the man spoke about the importance of perspective, emphasizing that innovation and insight often came from unexpected places. He encouraged her to trust her instincts, to speak her mind, and to approach challenges with curiosity and openness. Her ability to notice details, understand people, and offer practical solutions made her an ideal partner for this project. She began to feel a sense of excitement building within her. The opportunity was daunting, but it was also a chance to test herself, to step into a world she had only observed from a distance. She thought about the ways she had solved problems in the cafe, the moments when careful observation and thoughtful action had made a difference. Now she could apply those same skills on a larger scale, in ways that could impact more people and shape outcomes that mattered. The man noticed her thoughtful expression and encouraged her to ask questions, to explore the project in detail before committing. She asked about the scope, the goals, the potential obstacles, and the team she would be working with. Each answer reassured her, showing that her contributions would be respected and that she would be supported in her role. As the morning passed, they discussed strategies, goals, and the practical steps needed to begin the project. She began to see a clear path forward, a way to apply her skills and insights in a meaningful context. Her confidence grew with each idea discussed, each question answered, and each step clarified. She realized that the opportunity was not just about work, but about growth, learning, and self-discovery. She also thought about the implications for her life beyond the project. Accepting this opportunity would mean change, stepping out of her comfort zone and embracing new challenges. It would require courage, adaptability, and a willingness to learn. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness, knowing that the journey ahead would not be easy, but also realizing that it held the potential for personal and professional fulfillment. The man emphasized that the project would be a partnership, that her ideas and perspective would be integral to its success. He wanted her to approach it with confidence, knowing that her insights were valuable and that her way of thinking was rare. He encouraged her to trust herself and to embrace the challenges with curiosity and determination. She reflected on her own journey, the small moments of observation, the quiet understanding of people, and the careful problem-solving she had developed over time. She realized that these skills, once unnoticed and undervalued, could now have a significant impact. It was a moment of recognition and empowerment, a turning point where her potential was acknowledged and valued. The conversation continued, exploring practical details, strategies, and potential outcomes. They discussed timelines, goals, and the ways her insights could guide decisions. The man emphasized collaboration, creativity, and thoughtful action, reinforcing the importance of her contributions. She began to see how her perspective could shape the project and influence results in meaningful ways. As the morning light grew brighter, the waitress felt a growing sense of clarity and purpose. She realized that the opportunity was more than just a project. It was a chance to step into a new chapter of her life, to explore her abilities and to contribute in ways she had never imagined. The man's confidence in her abilities reinforced her own sense of value and potential. She also thought about the impact on her daily life, the changes it would bring, and the new experiences she would encounter. It was a moment of anticipation, filled with the promise of growth, challenge, and discovery. She felt a sense of readiness, knowing that she had the skills, insight, and courage to face what lay ahead. The man concluded their discussion by expressing his gratitude and excitement for the collaboration. He reassured her that she would not be alone, that she would have support and guidance, but that her perspective would be central to the project's success. He encouraged her to embrace the opportunity with confidence, curiosity, and determination. As they parted, the waitress returned to her work at the cafe, carrying with her a quiet sense of empowerment. She reflected on the journey that had led her to this moment, the small observations, careful thinking, and the courage to speak her mind. She realized that her skills, once unnoticed, were now recognized and valued, opening the door to possibilities she had never imagined. The cafe returned to its normal rhythm. But for the waitress, the day had marked a turning point. She carried a renewed sense of confidence, a deeper awareness of her potential, and a sense of excitement about the future. The opportunity offered by the man was more than a project. It was a chance to grow, to explore, to contribute in meaningful ways. She thought about the people she had observed, the patterns she had noticed, and the insights she had developed over time. Now she could apply these skills in a new context where her ideas and perspective could have a real impact. It was a moment of realization, a recognition that intelligence, observation, and empathy were valuable, assets that could shape outcomes and inspire change. The man left the cafe with a sense of anticipation, excited about the collaboration and the potential for meaningful results. The waitress continued her work, but with a renewed sense of purpose and confidence. The encounter had opened a door to new possibilities, showing that courage, insight, and a willingness to embrace challenges could transform ordinary moments into extraordinary opportunities that day. The cafe had witnessed not just a conversation, but a turning point. The waitress had recognized her own value, and the man had discovered a rare and powerful perspective. Together, they had begun a journey that promised growth, learning, and impact. It was a story of opportunity, courage, and the recognition of potential, reminding both of them that brilliance can emerge in the most unexpected places and that the right opportunity can change the course of a life. Weeks had passed since the initial conversation at the cafe, and the waitress had gradually begun to work alongside the man on his project. Each day brought new challenges, and she met them with a growing confidence and determination. She had moved beyond her familiar routine, stepping into a world that demanded creativity, observation, and practical problem-solving. Every idea she offered was considered, every insight valued, and every contribution built on her unique perspective. The man watched her work closely, noting how she approached each task with clarity and thoughtful analysis. She did not rush. She considered each detail, thought through the consequences, and proposed solutions that were practical yet innovative. Her ability to combine empathy with logic impressed him constantly, and he often found himself learning from her perspective. He realized that intelligence was not just knowledge, it was the ability to see the bigger picture, anticipate outcomes, and consider the human element in every decision. Her contributions began to have a visible impact on the project. Teams that had once struggled to communicate were now collaborating more effectively, guided by the insights she offered. She helped clarify roles, establish clearer communication channels, and create an environment where everyone felt heard and valued. Her empathy and understanding helped bridge gaps, build trust, and motivate the team. It was a transformation that went beyond processes and procedures. It touched the very way people worked and interacted. As the project progressed, she faced new challenges that tested her skills and resilience. There were moments of doubt, when decisions were difficult or outcomes uncertain. But she relied on her experience and her way of thinking to navigate each situation. She observed carefully, asked questions, and proposed solutions that were thoughtful and grounded. Her approach was methodical, yet flexible, allowing her to adapt to unexpected developments while maintaining focus on the overall goal. The man continued to mentor her, providing guidance while encouraging her to trust her instincts and take initiative. He recognized that her abilities were rare, and he wanted her to grow not only as a contributor to the project, but also as a thinker and problem solver in her own right. He encouraged her to explore new ideas, challenge assumptions, and approach each task with curiosity and openness. Through this process, the waitress began to see her own growth. She recognized the value of her perspective, the importance of her insights, and the impact she could have on the work around her. She reflected on how far she had come since that first rainy afternoon in the cafe, when a simple question had opened the door to possibilities she had never imagined. She realized that her intelligence, observation, and empathy were strengths that could influence outcomes and inspire change. Her confidence grew as she successfully navigated complex situations and contributed meaningful solutions. She began to see herself not just as someone capable of observing and understanding, but as someone who could lead, guide, and influence positive change. The skills she had honed over years of careful observation and reflection were now being recognized and applied in a broader context. Amplifying their impact, the man watched her transformation with quiet pride. He had always believed in the power of potential, and he saw in her a rare combination of curiosity, insight, and practical intelligence. She had shown that brilliance could appear in unexpected places, and he was grateful for the opportunity to work with someone who challenged him to think differently, consider new perspectives, and appreciate the value of empathy and observation in decision-making. The cafe, once the setting for their initial encounter, remained a quiet reminder of how the journey had begun. The people she had once served now saw her differently, sensing the confidence and purpose she carried with her. She had moved beyond the routine of her previous life, stepping into a world where her ideas and perspective were not only valued, but essential. As the project reached critical milestones, the impact of her contributions became evident. Deadlines were met more effectively, team dynamics improved, and outcomes reflected the thoughtful, human-centered approach she had brought to the work. Her insights had helped shape strategies, solve problems, and guide the project towards success. It was a transformation not just for her, but for the team she worked with and the results they achieved. Beyond the immediate project, she began to consider the broader implications of her work and her own abilities. She realized that her skills could be applied in other contexts, that her perspective was valuable in many areas, and that her confidence had grown in ways she had not anticipated. She had discovered that the courage to embrace challenges, the curiosity to observe and understand, and the willingness to act thoughtfully could open doors to opportunities she had never imagined. The man recognized the change in her as well. He saw a young woman who had grown into a confident, thoughtful, and insightful contributor. He valued her perspective not just for the practical solutions she provided, but for the way she thought, the depth of her understanding, and the clarity with which she approached challenges. He often reflected on the moment in the cafe when she had first spoken up. Realizing that it had marked the beginning of a journey that would transform both of their lives, she continued to embrace new challenges, learning, growing, and contributing with confidence. Her journey was not without obstacles, but she had developed the skills, resilience, and insight to navigate them successfully. Each success reinforced her sense of purpose and the recognition that her abilities were valuable and impactful. She had moved from observation to action, from quiet reflection to meaningful contribution, and from potential to realization. The story of the cafe, the man, and the waitress became an inspiration for others who knew the journey. It was a reminder that talent and intelligence could appear in unexpected places, that courage and curiosity could open doors to opportunities, and that insight, combined with empathy and observation, could create meaningful impact. It was a story of growth, discovery, and transformation, showing that ordinary beginnings could lead to extraordinary outcomes. As the weeks turned into months, the waitress continued to thrive, applying her skills, offering ideas, and influencing outcomes in ways that were both practical and profound. She had become an integral part of the project, a trusted advisor, and a respected contributor. Her confidence and insight were recognized not only by the man but by the teams she worked with, and her journey became a testament to the power of observation, empathy, and thoughtful action. The man often reflected on the day he asked for the best mind in the room and found it in the most unexpected person. He realized that intelligence and insight were not confined to titles or positions, but could emerge wherever curiosity, observation, and courage met. The waitress had shown him that brilliance was often hidden in plain sight, waiting to be recognized and nurtured. In the end, the project was successful, guided in part by the unique perspective and insight of the waitress, but the true success lay not just in the results, but in the transformation of those involved. She had grown into a confident, insightful, and impactful individual. And the man had been reminded of the importance of looking beyond appearances to recognize talent wherever it may be found. Their journey, which began with a simple question in a small cafe, had become a story of opportunity, growth, and transformation. It showed that when talent is recognized, nurtured, and applied thoughtfully, it can lead to extraordinary outcomes. The waitress had discovered her own potential, embraced challenges, and left a lasting impact on those around her. The man had found insight, inspiration, and a rare perspective that would influence his work and thinking for years to come. And in the quiet moments, when the cafe was empty and the rain tapped gently against the windows, the story remained a reminder that brilliance can appear in the most unexpected places, that curiosity and courage can open doors to new possibilities, and that every mind has the potential to change the world when it is recognized, valued, and allowed to flourish. Months had passed since the waitress first stepped beyond the familiar walls of the cafe, and her life had changed in ways she had never imagined. She had grown into her new role, contributing to projects that challenged her mind and required her insight at every turn. Each day brought lessons, small victories, and moments of self-discovery. The man continued to rely on her perspective, but she was no longer the cautious observer from the cafe. She was an active participant, confident in her abilities and aware of the impact she could make. The project they were working on had expanded beyond its initial scope, now involving multiple teams and a series of complex challenges. Deadlines were tighter, expectations higher, and the problems more intricate. She faced each situation with the calm determination she had always possessed. Coupled now with a newfound confidence in her judgment and skill, she had learned to trust herself. That trust allowed her to make decisions quickly and effectively when necessary. One morning, she arrived early at the office, reviewing the day's objectives and mentally preparing for the challenges ahead. The man joined her, carrying a folder with updates and reports. He had grown to value her opinion not just on specific problems, but on the overall direction of their work. He greeted her warmly, a subtle acknowledgement of the growth and confidence she had shown over the past months. They began the day by reviewing a particularly challenging situation. One team had encountered repeated delays due to miscommunication and unclear priorities. The man asked for her perspective, and she listened carefully, asking questions that clarified the deeper issues. She observed patterns in the communication breakdowns and identified the root causes that had been overlooked by others. Her insights were precise and actionable, offering a clear path forward that balanced practical steps with understanding the human factors at play. Her suggestions were implemented, and the results were immediate. The team responded positively, appreciating the clarity and structure she brought to the situation. Deadlines were met, and collaboration improved significantly. The man watched with quiet satisfaction, realizing that her approach had not only solved the problem, but it also transformed the way the team interacted. Her influence extended beyond individual tasks. It was shaping the culture of the workplace itself. As the day progressed, new challenges arose. She was asked to lead a brainstorming session for a critical aspect of the project. At first, she felt a familiar nervousness, recalling the days when she had questioned her own abilities. But she quickly reminded herself of how far she had come and of the skills and insight that had brought her to this point. She stood confidently, guiding the team through the session, encouraging creativity, and asking questions that prompted innovative thinking. Her leadership was natural, rooted in observation, empathy, and practical reasoning. The team responded well to her approach. She had a way of drawing out ideas from others, helping them see connections and possibilities they had not considered. The session produced results beyond expectations, demonstrating that her perspective and method of thinking were not only effective, but also inspiring to those around her. She realized that her ability to observe, analyze, and empathize could influence outcomes in ways she had never anticipated. Throughout the day, she encountered moments that tested her patience and problem-solving abilities. One team member expressed frustration over a perceived unfair workload, and another challenged her ideas during a strategy discussion. She handled each situation with tact and thoughtfulness, listening carefully acknowledging concerns, and guiding conversations toward constructive solutions. Her calm and measured approach diffused tension and fostered cooperation, showing that leadership was not about authority, but about understanding, communication, and empathy. The man observed these interactions with a growing admiration. He had always known her mind was sharp, but he now appreciated her ability to lead, inspire, and influence through understanding rather than force. Her growth had exceeded his expectations, and he recognized that her journey was ongoing, a continuous process of learning, applying, and evolving. In the evening, after a long day of meetings and problem-solving, they sat together to review progress and reflect on the outcomes. The waitress spoke about the challenges she had faced, the decisions she had made, and the lessons she had learned. She expressed a sense of satisfaction in knowing that her contributions were valued and that her perspective had a tangible impact on the work being done. She had moved from uncertainty to confidence, from observation to action, and from potential to achievement. The man listened attentively, offering guidance and encouragement. He reminded her that growth was ongoing, that challenges would continue to arise, and that her ability to adapt, think critically, and engage with others would be key to continued success. He emphasized that her journey was not just about solving problems, but about shaping the way people thought, collaborated, and approached challenges.